Approval of the memorandum of the September 20th, 2021 regular meeting. A copy has been posted. Councilors, any questions on that?
Move to approve.
First from Councilor Choi.
Second.
Second from Vice President Plunkett. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Memoranda of the September 20th, 2021 regular town council meeting is approved by a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Amy, any request to speak?
No request to speak.
Very good. Any mayor administration updates?
No updates.
Okay. Mayor, appreciate you joining us here today. Thank you. No old business, so we are quickly on to new business. We've got the Zionsville Gateway Area Study presentation. Kara Weber of Delve Design and Thomas P. Miller and Associates.
Thank you. I need to pull up the presentation here. Okay, good evening. I think we're just on the back screen. It looks like it's showing up back there. I apologize to our audience here. Wanted to say thank you to inviting us here tonight to give an update on the Zionsville Gateway area, fondly known as the ZGA because we don't have enough acronyms in our life. So we have a ZGA update for you all. Oh, you know what? That's actually not my screen, I'm realizing. Okay, so Joe's gonna move forward with me. If you'd go to the next slide. Okay, we'll roll with this. This is not the order that I have, but that's okay.
All right.
So here's some lovely pictures of the process that we have gone through. This process began a little bit over a year ago, about 14 months ago in August. We've had an incredible amount of input from the community, from some of yourselves, from a lot of different groups. It's been a really, really rich conversation of input. There's very, very smart and impassioned people in this community. It's been lovely to hear from them. So if you keep going forward. And yep, more pictures. So here's a quick overview of the process that we've gone through with listening sessions beginning in October of 2020, online listening sessions. Again, this was in the thick of COVID pre-vaccine, so we've made it very accessible to all. Stakeholder interviews, there's a lot of very specific stakeholder groups that have vested interests and particular lenses on it that was really helpful to hear from. We also have had draft study listening session previews. And finally, the ZGA website was launched on August 26th of this year.
And Kara, what's that website, just so people?
Yeah, thank you. ZionsvilleGatewayArea.com.
Thanks.
So everything that we're talking about today is also on that website. This is a quick high-level overview to get us all on the same page. Next slide, please. We all know and love the Zionsville Gateway area. It is a wonderful opportunity as a gateway into our beloved downtown. It is blighted. It has an incredible amount of opportunity. There are some areas there that are really, really rich in both their vistas and both what they can offer to support the downtown village business district, as well as the whole of Zionsville. So this is the area. The town owns one of these parcels. So any other vision going forward with the remainder of these parcels will be a business transaction of some sort, trade, a purchase, etc. So keep going forward, please. Part of this process was to identify some goals. What will be our litmus test as we explore what is right for this area? So those 3 items were any development there must be economically vibrant, it must be whole community serving, and it must be an authentically Zionsville experience. There was overwhelming response to all of these points, particularly the third, that this must feel like who we are and not try to emulate a community that we are not. And next up. So the process that we've gone through over the last 14 months or so, big picture, this is a design thinking framework. So number one, understand what does the community want? If we can allow the community's voice to drive any development, any changes in this area, that will be a success, that the community can write this story. Secondarily, how can we provide it? What is an economically feasible in terms of what the land allows us to provide and the topography, et cetera? How could it be provided? What are options? So it's the general process that we went through. Next slide. And then we arrived at a development suggestion through many iterations, many feedback items, and there's a lot of data to support this general development. We've developed a strategy that achieves everything that the community asked for while also being economically feasible and sticking to those 3 points. And the next slide. This is the ZGA study website. I hope that the town, I know that it's been published and pushed out in a lot of places. Hopefully the community has been able to explore it. I know there's been really great emails, feedback back already, great dialogue being had about the ZionsvilleGatewayArea.com again. And next up. So we can talk about numbers. We can keep going through this slide. I know it's probably tough to read up there, but we can certainly respond. Next slide. We can reference that as the questions. What does the community want? Again, this is all on the website, but we wanted to develop a summary of what it was that the community asked for in this area. So there's 5 points there. Next slide. And then how can we provide it? What would those design tenets be that would allow us to provide a development suggestion, again, a framework to achieve all those. So there's 8 points of design tenets. And then next slide. What are the next steps is probably an important question here. So on October 18th, the ZGA is on the agenda at the Planning Commission. And then the remainder of these steps, which we can discuss and ask questions about, can overlap, they can run concurrently, they can go in a few different orders depending upon how the town would like to proceed. And at what speed. Next slide rather. So that is a quick overview, and I would like to open up for questions that anyone may have.
Thanks, Kara. Appreciate that. So you sort of talked about it going in front of the Planning Commission. Will this be its own zoned area? In other words, a lot of that area today is zoned village business district with certain requirements, whether it's parking, height, setbacks. Will this have unique zoning to that? Is that the idea?
Yeah, that is part of what we're seeking to explore is the village business district appropriate? Does it need actually a subgroup? And there's concurrent efforts in studying kind of the form-based code as we've all kind of looked at in the town. So yes, that may be something that as a tool to promote this development, we may need to employ a separate or a subset of a code type. Yes.
Got it. And then once that's done, I know that this council a meeting or two ago, sort of the request of the mayor, had approved an appropriation for a parking lot that is in that because we didn't think it would be 2 to 3 years until there'd be ground broken. Is there a sense of generally, I mean, is this something that starts in a year? Does it start in 5 years? I mean, I know that's a hard to answer question, but any expectations of when folks might start seeing?
Anecdotally, there's a lot of eagerness, I think, as maybe the whole community has been aware of, to get development going here. I don't know that I can comment very quickly on timeline, other than I think within a year it would be, a critical path step is to get the infrastructure underway, roadway realignments, confirming all the traffic studies that supports the designs. So I would anticipate and jump in remainder of my consultant crew if you have other ideas, but I would anticipate within 12 months you could move forward with some version of development here.
And this has traditionally happened in other engagements you've been in. Do those developers still try to propose projects that are outside the scope of what in this case would be the ZGA zoning? I think that's been the problem in the past, where they propose things, it's not zoning, we say no, we're labeled anti-developer. Someone else proposes something even bigger, there's a community uproar, we say no, it's sort of this endless cycle. Does this sort of like Is this sort of, this is what we want, this is what we'd approve because we've zoned it? Is that kind of the?
That's essentially the spirit behind it. It's supposed to flip the script instead of the community and the town and yourselves being sort of on the responding end of developers coming in with ideas. The town then gets to be the protagonist in the story. They get to write the script. We get to author whatever those tools are that may support the development that we want. And then the developers, we can start to talk to them. Hey, if you play within these rules and achieve these goals, we anticipate that you will have a favorable outcome in your development suggestion.
Does that also, sorry, I'm hogging all the questions here. Does that also mitigate unreasonable or unrealistic land price expectations from owners of land? If this is then zoned to what the community wants, then they need to price it as a way that will support developers making money, them making money, and the town getting what they want. Is that, have you seen that?
Yeah,
work?
it should. I mean, with all of the numbers that were run in the pro forma, it should help normalize those land prices
Okay.
because it's shown as what is able to be developable at what tax rates and at what, anticipated revenue coming out of those developments.
Got it. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
You said two things that that seem to contradict each other a little bit. One is that when you mentioned the town owning one parcel of it and then wanting to acquire the other parcels, but then partnering with the developers to develop them, is the town contemplating purchasing the other properties or?
So I can't speak to that. I think the comment that I meant to say, and thank you for offering me a point of clarification, is that the town owns just one of those parcels and that the remainder of the development would have to be under some sort of a, if the town wants to explore trading a property for property the town owns elsewhere, or if developers want to purchase land from any of these individual landowners, either parceled or otherwise, those would be all separate transactions.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I've got a comment. The traffic has always been a problem and been like the center point of this. And I don't know who came up with the idea of shutting down Main Street from Sycamore to the creek, but it actually makes it work. And I was really impressed by that. It's the only drawing I've seen that I look at and I think that might actually work, because we've had a lot of drawings over the course of years that none of them seem to, there always seems to be, well, it won't work because of this or that. So yeah, overall, I know it's a lot goes into the gateway as a whole, but the traffic flow, I think, if nothing else gets pulled out of this to use, I think that works, or it looks like it would. Now watch, 5 years from now, they'll play back this recording and go, that idiot.
We'll be able to
Yeah,
blame you.
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Any other questions? Well, thanks for coming in.
Okay, thank you
Appreciate
very
it, Kara.
much.
Good job. Next, we've got a consideration of an ordinance to amend the town of Zionsville zoning ordinance. This is petition number 2021-31-Z, the Goodwin request. Mr. Price, I believe the floor is yours. This is ordinance 2021-10.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. For the record, my name is Matt Price with an address of 10 West Market Street in Indianapolis, Indiana. The Denton's Law Firm on behalf of Pulte Homes. I have two representatives of Pulte with me this evening, Dave Compton and Robin Crawford. And the three of us each presented at the Plan Commission meeting back on September 20th, so last month, to rezone the little over 68 acres at the northwest corner of 875E and County Road 400 South. The proposal that you have before you is to affect a zone map amendment to rezone that parcel from its existing R1 designation to R2. During the Plan Commission hearing, there were certain commitments and conditions that were made subject to their recommendation, which was unanimous. Those two commitments were that we would limit the number of single family homes to 106 and we've agreed to that commitment. And then secondly, we submitted, and I'll show you here in just a moment, we submitted a concept plan in connection with the rezoning that showed our anticipated perimeter landscaping. And we agreed that the landscaping would be in substantial conformance with that concept plan, which was crafted in consultation with nearby neighbors, as well as being informed by Zionsville's zoning ordinance. A third, I also mentioned conditions. There was one condition also placed on the rezoning, which was that there would be additional signage added at County Road 400 to indicate that traffic does not stop moving north-south along 875. We maintained and continued to keep that in as a condition. Upon additional review, as they say, following the hearing, we noted that that signage actually is already present on the stop sign at County Road 400 and 875. But we nevertheless maintained that as a condition, although we believe it's actually been fortuitously satisfied just by existing conditions. Joe just brought up my PowerPoint. If I could, I'd like to show you a few things about the proposal that we're very proud of. Move to the next slide. Just to orient you a little bit, this is the rectangular shaped property outlined in green is the parcel. There are some existing single family homes immediately on the east side of 875 that are not within a platted subdivision, but to orient you, immediately east of those homes along 875 is the Rockbridge subdivision. Then in the southwest, kind of a budding property is Hampshire. Go to the next slide. So you'll see kind of where Rockbridge fits in with the Goodwin property. And then I didn't mention this, but the preserve at Spring Knoll, also kind of kitty corner to us. The property is bordered on the, at least a portion of the southern property has an electric utility substation. The property itself is bisected by some high tension power lines, which have been incorporated into the development, if you will, which we'll show you. Next slide. That's just another depiction of kind of what the existing development pattern is in the vicinity. The next, Joe. And this is the site plan. I mentioned the landscaping. The access point to the far right is 875. It's our eastern access. The access to the south is off of County Road 400. You'll see that it's limited to the 106 home sites. And what was made a commitment at the Plan Commission hearing was that our landscaping plan would be as shown on this proposal. One of the things that was important to the neighbors across 875 was to have that screening maintained from their properties to the property to the west. Go to the next slide. Wanted to talk a little bit more about that because there were some specific commitments made, and the ordinance that you have in front of you is, at least in my experience, is unique in that we made certain private commitments at the Plan Commission meeting that we've incorporated into the ordinance that have to do with 3 of the property owners that are in close proximity to the project. Essentially, what we've done is we've worked with the property owners that are immediately east of the 875 entrance to propose some enhanced landscaping and screening treatments for them. The property owner who has their driveway that lines up with our southern entrance drive, the southern half of that entrance drive, we've discussed with them the installation of a fence to help screen their property from the entryway. The idea being that we wanted to make sure that there weren't headlights intruding onto their property. What we've proposed is as a minimum treatment would be that fence construction. Likewise, with the property owner immediately north, the one I just spoke of is Mrs. Ide. Immediately north is a property owner that we've also worked with to develop a plan for adding some additional berming on their side of the property, including some additional landscaping treatments. Also, some detail you might see in that commitment having to do with the relocation of an existing crab tree. All that spelled out in those private commitments. Then I'll mention one other thing because it's more of an ongoing thing, but it's something that's going to get worked through the development plan phase of this project. Is we've also walked the site with one of the property owners to work on what we might be able to do to address some existing drainage conditions that they're experiencing now. I think as kind of the result of the impacts of the Hampshire project and the Rockbridge project and kind of how those two function today and what we might be able to do to improve that situation going forward. There's not a proposed solution yet, but the investigation has started. That's something we feel like we can make great strides on as we work through the specifics that you would as part of a development plan. And if you go to the next slide, Joe, thank you. This is just some representations or simulation, if you will, looking from Mrs. Ide's driveway back to the northwest, kind of show what entryway off 875 would look like. The next slide. This is a vantage point looking southwest that you can see just in the far right corner of that picture. You can see a representation of what that entry drive would look like, and it points south and southwest. Then we do want to show some of the home renderings for what the proposed homes will look like. I do want to add that a 3-car garage is an option, so that's a possibility on several of the home elevations. Next slide. These are some of the interior and finishes. Obviously, Pulte's been in the community for a number of years. Robin, in fact, just moved back to Indiana here recently. She was actually part of the Cobblestone project when it was launched. Her sister lives here in Zionsville. So kind of coming home for Robin. Next slide. Here's some other examples of the streetscape. I think that's it. Oh, got another one. And it would incorporate sidewalks, street trees, all the improvements that you would anticipate through the development plan phase of the project. Dave, Robin, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. We'd respectfully request your approval this evening. Thank you.
Matt, on the southeast portion of that property, it looks like it kind of juts in a little bit, and there's a little like is it taking the whole square of the Goodwin property? I'm just looking on Google Earth here. There's kind of like this farmland, then just a real narrow strip of grass, and then like just a little like I don't know if it's a vegetable garden or something. It looks like it has some power lines on it. I was just curious if that's going to get.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it is. It is all encompassing. It comes to the point of that intersection. I think what you may be looking at is that, Dave, that's part of maybe the existing drainage improvements that are there.
Got it.
Yeah.
So will that just be left as is? Got it. If you're gonna, I'll ask just for public record, if you want to talk, just don't mind coming to the lectern so folks online can hear you too.
Yeah, it'll be incorporated and largely left undisturbed as part of the existing legal drain.
Got it. You mentioned this casually, but just to reinforce, this came with a unanimous approval from Planning Commission?
It did, subject to the commitments and condition that I mentioned, yes.
Got it. Did the schools do an analysis on
That was going to be my next
impact?
question.
They did not. I think part of our rationale for the case was given our anticipated price points, it wasn't something that was requested of us anyway. And we have not, at least not recently, made requests like that for more of a traditional single family development.
Got it. What is the anticipated price points, just out of curiosity?
We think it'll be solidly in the 450s on up. Yeah. What Pulte is dealing with now is the on up continues to go up for a lot of reasons in the economy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess this talking about the school. So you said that the price point that I mean, explain that a little. I just don't.
Yeah.
Educate me on that.
Well, what I believe what the school formula has indicated over the years is that using their projection of child per unit, child per home, that if you're in the 450 to 550 kind of range, it's a wash under their projections. And so where I've seen the studies get more of a fine point put on them is if you're doing something other than a traditional single family home where it's below that, significantly below that price point.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's kind of you meet the standard, if you will.
Yeah. Interesting. I would have thought it, but by the amount of units, not by the price of the home. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and what I think maybe that's the reason that might be somewhat intuitive is that I think in some of the higher density projects that have had lower price points, that's where you've seen those studies.
Man, is that just because that's the price that's tied to taxes that people are paying?
Exactly. It's taxes, and the school funding formula contemplates how many children they get, so many dollars per child. So when you factor in the child generation component plus the taxes paid, the kind of rule of thumb, at least in recent years, has been that $500,000 mark or thereabouts.
Because I got to imagine that Pleasant View Elementary's got to be getting pretty full, I would think.
I think that is one of the schools that has experienced some growth. Obviously, they've got the new school going in as well, right in that same area.
That's true.
To handle that.
Matt, do you know how many more homes you can build if you get it to R2 versus the R1?
Well, yeah, R1 is extraordinarily low. It is 1 unit per, no more, I think, than 1 unit per 2 acres. Wayne's nodding. So over the course of 68 acres, you're talking about nominally 39, 40 homes.
Yep.
So there's a difference. I think what we've seen over the last several years is that, the area has continued to develop kind of more consistently with this level of density around a 1.6, 1.7 unit per acre, like in Rockbridge, certainly Hampshire. And so this is consistent kind of with that existing framework. And this property has some challenges with it with regard to the utility lines. It doesn't lend itself to, more of an estate home type development. And so this seems like the natural fit. I think I can't speak for the Plan Commission, but I think that was part of their thinking.
So this intersection 400 and 875 has started to pop up in my email more and more as people thinking that it needs a 4-way stop. And I, at this point, don't agree, but I could see how adding this neighborhood could have that impact. Did the traffic study or anything address that intersection?
It studied it and concluded that it was a very high level of service, even including this contemplated development. I can't remember which Plan Commission member said it, but I believe that it was said on the record that it was an A-B level of service, making it one of the highest functioning intersections around town, by comparison purposes.
Okay.
And they did, we'll say that was a matter that it actually, we got continued a couple of months in front of the Plan Commission because they wanted us to incorporate some background traffic counts that contemplated development that has occurred, over the last 3 years, including not using data that would have been associated with the lockdown period where there may have been less trips, fewer trips.
Yeah.
So we feel confident about that study.
Okay.
We are being asked. One of the things I think a plug for Zionsville and the leadership here is, Zionsville has I think you see Westfield adopting our model now, which is when you build a new subdivision, you have to improve perimeter roads. And with the development of Hampshire and the surrounding area, there's been a number of perimeter roads improved over the last half dozen years to where those roads are, in as good a condition as they've been in a generation, really. And so, yes, traffic has certainly increased over what it was, 20, 25 years ago, but the roads have correspondingly improved, and the subdivisions are equipped with acceleration and deceleration lanes, turn lanes, all of the requirements under our development plan.
Who manages the commitments? Is it just the private developer that's responsible for policing their own commitments. The word comes to mind, the Triscari effect. And I just don't want that to happen again.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that if the town is the ones that are going to be in charge of that, or if it's going to be Pulte Homes, I just want to be sure that that we don't have that effect from your neighbors that you've made these commitments to, even though they're on our docket.
It's a good question, Counselor. So it's a little bit of both here in terms of, I guess, who has the ability to enforce them. And I'll explain that a little bit here because it's a unique situation. We have one set of commitments that I would call traditional plan commission enforced, town enforced commitments. And those are the perimeter landscaping, building our project in conformance with the concept plans, which will be reviewed by the plan commission moving into the next phase, and the limitation on the number of dwelling units. So those are going to be publicly enforceable commitments. The other three commitments I spoke of that are with the individual property owners, we styled those differently to make them what we call private commitments. That's going to be a commitment or an agreement between Pulte and the individual homeowner. Now, they are placed of record so that the public can be aware of the commitment, but those are going to be separate individual agreements. There is a reason for that, which is that those commitments were to set out what the plan was, realizing that those plans required a fair amount of working through with the homeowner. In other words, we were going to have to coordinate with Mrs. Ide, for example, on what exactly does she want to best serve her needs. We've made a minimum commitment today, but it may be different depending on what her individual preferences are, like style of fence, whether there's a fence at all, whether she prefers landscaping.
So when you say minimum, is there a dollar assignment to that, or is there just the physical drawings that I've seen? Because one of those drawings looks like a really short fence.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear as ever that, say you guys have an issue, we approve the development, and then there was a dollar amount that you guys all agreed to, and they don't want you on your property or something along those lines.
Right. Yeah. There's not a dollar amount. It's based on I would say it's based on the concept of having that additional screening and then providing representations of what that screening may look like. What I want to be careful about is, while we've had very detailed discussions with, for example, Mrs. Ide, I keep mentioning her, that individual property, I don't want to represent that she agrees to a particular design. What I think she is looking forward to working with us on is, reducing that to a specific design as we go forward with the process.
Thank you.
Yep.
Matt, similar to Craig's question, I mean, I didn't get a number, and maybe I have it somewhere else, but in this change, what does that allow? How many total new additional home sites does that allow you to build? I guess it doesn't really matter because you don't have a plan. Or do you have a plan for what would be the case if we didn't pass this?
We definitely do not have a plan for 40 homes.
Yeah, it's just not feasible.
It's not. What we've agreed is that there would not be any more than 106, and the R2 is not limited to single family. So we've agreed to limit it to single family, 106 total homes.
What's the normal if it were 106 without any other limitations placed on it? What would have been the normal limit?
Well, you could get more creative. Certainly, the minimum lot size is I believe is 5,000 square feet. We have approximately 30 acres of open space. Even taking out the area that's under the tension lines, we're still like 28 acres of open space. We have a fair amount of open space. So, if you wanted to try to maximize density, you could go up from there, certainly up from the 106.
Do you have any idea what you could have fit in there?
We do a grid plan. I'll tell you what we did. There's been a history with this property, which is we knew that there have been others who tried to propose sites that I will say just in a ballpark, we're probably 20% more dense. And we're unsuccessful. We felt like that to be successful, there was going to need to be the reduction in density, and correspondingly, there was going to need to be the screening that we proposed, the robust landscaping, the working with the neighbors along 875. Those were going to have to be. We welcomed that opportunity. We met with them individually and as a group, and worked through a number of issues that way, and came up with a proposal that met our needs from a viability standpoint. I think went a long way towards addressing their concerns as well.
And is this urban or rural service district, you know?
This isn't a rural service district.
Kind of. Mr. Lance, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Any concerns, yes or no, with 106 homes and wastewater capacity? He's shaking his head no. Okay. Thank you. Any questions, counselors? Any motions?
No proof.
Got a first from Counselor Troy,
Second.
second from Counselor Trailer. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Ordinance 2021-10 is adopted on final reading with a vote of 6 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you, Ms. Price. Next, we've got a consideration of the 2022 budget for the town of Zionsville, Indiana. This is a first reading and public hearing. Tammy and Greg and Mayor, you're welcome to.
Good evening. This is our second budget process working together. And thank you for the time many of you have taken to attend our earlier budget meetings. The feedback we have received has been extremely helpful. I believe this year we are all more familiar with the different sources or the differences between local government budget management and private business. There are similarities and best practices that town officials can draw from, but it's not an apples to apples comparison. Unlike a business whose goal it is to generate profit and create shareholder value, local governments are charged with providing and maintaining public infrastructure, public safety, parks and recreation services and amenities, planning services, and community and economic development activities, to name more than a few. Corporations and small businesses only succeed when they generate a profit. In local government, a balanced budget is achieved when total expected revenues are equal to total expenditures. However, excess revenue and underspent budgets can accrue over times in different funds. When these fund balances reach a designated threshold, they may be earmarked for specific uses, such as capital expenditures for public safety equipment and vehicles. Not all of our divisions or departments generate revenue or user fees, but they do have a vital role supporting the overall operations of our town. For example, IT, communications, and human resources. Most of our departments rely to some degree on property tax revenue to support their efforts. Not even town court operates exclusively on the fees that they generate. When I proposed the 2021 budget, I shared with you that we had a healthy fund balance that could be allocated towards future capital projects. These were planned projects and money had been intentionally saved for these specific purposes. Rather than appropriating the fund balance through the normal annual budget process, this council preferred approving an operating budget that could be funded fully through incoming revenue sources, and advised that capital projects would be reviewed through additional appropriations requests in the following year. Therefore, you will find a similar approach being proposed today. This evening, we are proposing a balanced but operational budget that invests in our workforce. Our 2022 revenues are projected to increase approximately 2%. This increase is lower than what we have seen in previous years. Zionsville, like many other communities across Indiana, are expected to see reduced local income tax distributions compared to previous years. The DLGF, Department of Local Government Finance, projects this revenue source will be lower than in past years due to the impact of COVID. As you know, local income taxes are our second highest revenue source. Therefore, we are proposing a conservative approach to our 2022 budgets. I am pleased to share with you a balanced budget in that the incoming revenue is slightly higher than the proposed expenditures. Our 2022 anticipated revenue is $32,587,219. The 2022 proposed expenditure budget is $32,570,253. Given the information we have today, this 2022 budget is constrained to 2% growth over the current year's budget. We propose to invest this growth in our workforce. The budget offers an across-the-board 4% payroll increase for our employees. The remaining 2022 budget lines will remain at or below the 2021 levels. The budget proposal will allow residents to continue to enjoy current day service levels. Since the start of my administration, we have worked to modernize our processes and tools across all of our departments. This includes policy setting and long-term planning initiatives as well. 3 upcoming financial projects include, first, the establishment of a finance committee. This finance committee will review, update, and create financial policies, and it will explore opportunities for additional revenue generation. This 5-person team will include myself, the Deputy Mayor, Julie Johns-Cole, Town Councilor Brian Traylor, our CFO, Tammy Havard, a Zionsville community member, Amanda Rubeck, and who serves as the retail banking area manager for Star Bank and the town's financial consultant. A second piece, and something that this committee will work on initially, is to update our cash reserve policy. We will set a minimum balance for major funds and review and update the current disbursement threshold. Say that 3 times fast. Our current policy is about 15 to 20% of disbursements. I believe we would pose 25% of revenues recommended by our financial consultant. But that's just an example of sorts of things that this finance committee will wrestle with. And finally, we are going to work on sustainability planning. I would like to see us create an expense and revenue forecast that anticipates trends beyond 18 months and a 5-year capital improvement plan for each department at a minimum. Now, I'm going to ask Tammy to come up. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mayor.
Council members, thank you again for coming to the budget workshops and to understand more about municipal finance and all of the nuances about it. We really do appreciate you coming and learning about the departments and what they can do with their 2022 budgets. And we will present that same kind of information again here for the public. And we do have Greg Garitas here with Financial Solutions Group, who will come up and talk some more on the financial strategies that we're going to go through.
Thank you. Thank you, Tammy, and good evening. Excuse me. My name is Greg Garitas, and I'm an independent financial advisor and team all across the state of Indiana. And we work, as you know, on many, many budgets for schools, cities, towns, counties, you name it, and been doing it for quite a few years. I really kind of got involved over the last maybe 6 months and as the independent consultant to evaluate kind of how we go forward with the Zionsville budget. And a couple things became very, very apparent. Everybody's desire to come up with a balanced budget. And so everybody's desire to also treat capital expenditures as additional appropriation and go through that process. Kind of unique. A lot of people will build it in. I'm wrestling with this in Westfield right now. We'll build it into the budget and go ahead and okay those. Some will issue GO bonds. Some will do it in a different way. through the additional appropriation process, which is kind of what I hear you all want to do. In order to do that, then, so that we don't allocate too much of our resources to capital, as the mayor had indicated, we're proposing that there be a minimum fund balance established. We've recommended by resolution that helps with credit ratings and those type of things. So you like to see a formal policy. And recall that 25% of revenue, as revenue goes up, hopefully, rather than down, like we're experiencing, then the amount of the balance will go up. And the reason for the balance is to be able to pay payroll, ongoing operating expenses, keeping in mind property taxes still only come twice a year. Income is each month. So we got to keep up with that cash flow. The sustainability plan is, I've misspoke, I've called it a 3-year plan. It's actually going to be looking out 5 years. I looked at my draft, and those are the things that we're going to try and talk to we know there's a lot of demand for services. I just heard 160 new homes coming in. And usually, by the way, we do a fiscal plan analysis on that and make sure what kind of impact that's going to bring in. But we know that's going to bring in an incremental impact. And so in order to do that, we've got to factor that incremental and those new demands for services into an overall plan. And that's what the sustainability is going to do. So then in order to then work on our capital side, we're recommending the 5-year capital improvement plan. And we're trying to work with the department heads and put that together, because I know there's a tremendous amount of park needs. I know there's a tremendous amount of equipment needs and things like that. I've sat through many type of presentations from the department heads, and I've heard it loud and clear. So we'll be putting together that. Then to make sure that, I know in the past you've done a lot of debt bond issues. And so we want to put together an overall debt strategy and kind of look at it in comparison to your neighbors. I always do a weighted cost of capital, make sure there's not refunding possibilities there, and see how your weighted cost of capital matches up to your credit rating and to other of your peer groups. And so that's something that we'll be looking at. The budget improvements, as you know, but that is putting together this finance committee. And the way I look at it is the budget should never stop after approval. It should be managed like you would a budget in a business each and every month. And where Tammy and I've been working on that, will have not only variance to actual on revenue, but variance to actual on expenses that you're used to. But we really want to see variance to actual on revenue and things like that. So yeah, that's the goal. And to bring it all back, then Tammy's going to kind of give you the overall details, as we did in one of the couple of the work sessions last week. And so we can kind of boil down as deep as you want in the numbers. Is there anything else you think I missed and wanted me to hit?
Well, the council might have questions on the revenue. Yeah. Let me plug in. So while we get that up, I think it's coming right now. There we go. So this is the OpenGov Financial Transparency Portal, and some of the council members have been able to log in and be able to see the information and to slice and dice it. So I just want to highlight a few of the views right now. As Greg mentioned, that we are very concerned about revenues at this point, and that the drop in the local income tax is something that has caused our budget process to shift a little bit in 2022 when looking forward. So when you look at what the income is for the town of Zionsville, you can see that for these tax supported funds, that most of the income is taxes. And so over 92% is coming in from taxes. And then once you drill down into that, you notice that it's property taxes. But if you look, the two income taxes, both the normal income tax for the town as well as the public safety specific income tax, that almost makes up the other half of the revenues that are coming in on those taxes. You also have fees like building permits, anyone filing for the BZA or Plan Commission, that revenue comes in here as well. And then looking over at the expenses, we see that there are some major categories of this $32 million budget that is proposed in front of you today. So personnel is by far the greatest asset of the town of Zionsville. And you can see that reflected here in the numbers, because in order to pave the streets and to run the technology for the citizens to be able to see, you need people in order to do that. You've got the services, including some studies and consultants and things like that. You've got capital, which of course is infrastructure and roads. There's debt service on parks and public works. You have operating expenses because the police and fire need uniforms and to be able to operate their departments. You've got transfers into basically mortgage for the town hall from several funds. And then there's also a little bit for refunds. And as you can see in this budget, as the mayor mentioned, that we have a strong investment in the personnel. We want to keep the people, and as Joe will talk next on the compensation study, that we're making changes in order to retain and to attract employees. And in the other categories, including services and capital operating, you'll notice that those are either held flat or there might be some changes between categories if one was lowered in services and increased in operating or vice versa. So by far, the personnel is the increase that we're looking at, and included in this budget is a 4% across the board increase for the employees. Does anyone have any questions on that right now? And then this is just a different way to look at it. We're going to look at it by the departments. So again, public safety is a priority in the town of Zionsville. And you can see that between fire, police, and public works, the significant portion of this tax supported budget is going towards those areas. So let me talk a little bit about what the departments are going to do with the revenue, with this budget that they are proposing in 2022. So we have the police department, which you saw was a significant expense of the town of Zionsville. We're going to maintain those authorized sworn staffing levels. We're going to continue to improve the fleet and explore the use of electric vehicles. We're going to continue preparing officers for the future through supervisory and leadership training and continue efforts to attain national accreditation. In public works, they're going to maintain the recent year's budget of the road surfacing plan, and not included in this tax supported funds, but also a priority of the Public Works Department. You'll see the road impact fee fund later in the year. The construction of the next roundabout at 800 East and Oak Street, and the construction is anticipated to be funded, as I mentioned, from that road impact fee. So it's not included in this analysis. And then we're also going to maintain the current service levels in seasonal services and programs. In the fire department, as you know, we're going through a strategic planning process. And so we're going to do more planning on that front, as well as conduct a merit lieutenant promotion process and develop new firefighting hiring lists for the next 2 years. With human resources, they're going to utilize technology to streamline processes and create strategy in the areas of succession planning, talent management, organizational and performance management, leadership training and development, diversity and inclusion, as well as workplace wellness. In finance, you'll continue to see implemented systems that will increase the accuracy and timeliness of data, as well as strengthen our internal controls. We have under finance is also court, and they're rolling out updates to their state software, and we're looking for options for the public assistance systems. In the Department of Community and Economic Development, you'll notice that the Perry Township Land Use Plan is included in the 2022 requested budget. And that was a priority that we've heard from council, from the mayor, as well as from the residents. They're also going to focus on technology and the full implementation in the in-field services as a result of the purchases and advancements in the service model, and as well as investing in staff. You'll notice that the training has not been where it has been in the past years because of COVID and the limited opportunities. So we hope in 2022 and in the future to be able to go back and be able to retain those levels of training and get more staff to be experts in their field.
Hey, Tammy,
Yes.
you go really fast. Great information.
I'm sorry.
Could you go back to the top to the fire
Yes.
department on that? previous
Absolutely.
One, I
Oops.
want to make sure I read something right. All right, what's the fire? Nope. Nope. There we go. Okay, Joe, I have one of those bullet points I'll talk to you later about. I have a question about that. Nothing big. All right, go ahead.
So some of the changes from when we presented at the budget workshops were that we went back and we looked at the property tax and the local income tax allocations to each of the funds. As it was expressed that we wanted to focus and to build up the operating funds in addition to the capital funds. And so you'll notice that on the previous form 2 that was published to the agenda for tonight, that we do have a change, that we had a local income tax certified shared of 5.4 million. And now we're bumping that up to 5.6. And you'll notice that change is coming from the motor vehicle fund. And so that is from, was 1.9 and now it's 1.85. So that is just one change. And then the property tax portions of each of the funds is not actually determined until we get the certified information from the state. And so we do have flexibility up until the point of the published information on our Form 3, which is what we'll have the public hearing on here in a little bit. And so on this Form 3 notice to taxpayers, it lists the budget estimates, which we cannot exceed any of those budget estimates on what is adopted for each of those funds. And then it also sets a maximum established levy, so the amount to be raised by property taxes. So again, whatever we end up certifying in the end, it will not exceed these numbers here. Does
Tammy,
anyone have questions
Can you
on?
explain why that $180,000 shifted?
Yes,
What was
so
the rationale behind that going from highways to general?
and do you want to speak to?
Well, when we look at the overall MVH fund, it is, especially out 5 years, which I told you, I've got some estimates and running. The MVH fund is absorbing actually the balance was growing. And so it makes sense to, what we normally do is reproportion those each and every year to keep an operating balance in all the funds. And so that's what it was.
And I've seen fund balances through June 30th. Do you have more accurate information?
For instance, in the general fund, it's over 6 million right now, and that does not include any transfers from the fire or the parks fund. So the cash balances, as you'll see in the sustainability plan, and as you'll hear from Greg and myself, they are healthy balances. But I think the concern from council was not necessarily using cash balance that has been accrued over past years, that the focus was more on looking at 1 year and seeing that the revenues coming in for that year more closely match the expenses. So we could leave it where it was before, and we would have enough cash in order to sustain the budget, and we wouldn't have any concerns with that. But what I think I heard at the last budget meeting was that they wanted the revenues to more closely align with the expenses in the fund. And so this was in response to that as a proposed change that we can make in order to help to get to a closer goal of that part.
I didn't quite understand that.
So with the revenues, there are some revenues that are specific to a fund. There are motor vehicle highway distributions that go direct to that fund. The town has some flexibility in being able to allocate the local income tax, for instance. So we allocate the local income tax between several funds. So the public safety lit, that one is revenue specific, that one 100% goes into the public safety lit fund. But the other lit can go just to the general fund, or to the general fund and the police fund, or to the general fund, police fund, and the motor vehicle highway fund. So we have flexibility, as Greg mentioned, to monitor those cash balances and to allocate a certain portion of those amounts to the funds, and to review that information and to make those decisions based on what we're seeing and what new information that we've gotten in. And the same thing is true for property taxes, that we also can, with a few exceptions, like cumulative capital development fund is a set rate that can only go down and can't go up above a certain amount, right? But the other property taxes you can shift in order to look at the amounts in each of those funds and to fund it accordingly. And so that's why we have Greg in the sustainability plan, in order to help us with those allocations and what makes the most sense, while watching those cash balances, not only now, but looking at future needs of each of those departments, and then making adjustments to be able to fund those.
So if you look at the Form 1 expense lines, so I've got different columns here. I've got funds, departments, categories, some subcategories, line item codes. Is the money that goes, I think I know the answer to this question, but I want to reaffirm this, is the money that goes into a, well, I'll just pick one here. So I've got planning and zoning that has $160,000 for consulting. So that's in the general fund, in the planning and zoning department, under services and charges, under professional services, 160 grand. Is that money effectively locked in there, in the sense that if another consulting, another department, let's say IT, where they've got $60,000, decide suddenly they need $100,000, can that money move by itself, or does that money movement require a public hearing, public action, public defense of that change?
So anything that is in here by fund and by department and category, so up to that services and charges level, that is set by council. And so changes to that would go before council. So if someone, in your example of an IT department and a planning department, it would need to stay within the department, within the category.
Got it. So the category is the restriction, not the subcategory. Is that a correct statement? Got it.
Now, every year, at the end of the year, finance comes before council and asks for adjustments, and we do council does look at all of the information on the line level to make sure that none of the lines are zero. And it is common that maybe there's a consulting line and a professional services line, and that one of those is overspent and one of those is underspent. Some of it is semantics of how that was booked in the system, or just how council would perceive it. But within that category and generally within the lines, the departments, and definitely within their budgets, would try to stay within.
Got it. The sustainability piece, which I'm very excited about, will that be down? So a great example today, right? We approved 106 homes for Pulte. We've done it before. It's always unnerving because we are doing it without really any sort of idea of the impact that it has downstream to the existing departments, right? I mean, if we look at this budget, the town is growing, the budget is flat because of the lit piece. Will future developments like that, much like it used to go through the schools, and I think they should always go through the schools, will they sort of have a sustainability component to it? So this council, future councils will understand that we're approving 100 homes. This is going to have a net. We're going to have to hire one police officer. This is going to help us by 20%. Like, those are the things that I'm most interested in. I'm less interested in the homes themselves, but really what is the impact of the services for those new residents, but more importantly, the current residents?
Well, and let me speak to that. Greg Garatos again. Your top 10 items I put for improving the budget as we go forward, I just added number 11. And Pulte Homes knows me well because we do those type of studies. They just left Avon, Indiana 2 weeks ago, and they're required to pay for the study and have the study done.
Much like a traffic study or something else.
Yes,
like that, right?
And it's basically an impact study, or what we call it is the cost of community services kind of going forward. And they're very used to a very lengthy data request that asks some very specific questions. So I'm going to add number 11 to the recommended list.
Yeah, I mean, administratively, I'd be very interested in requiring that, not for if you're building a single home, but for at some minimum threshold for these bodies to understand what is the impact we're having.
We do that normally for any number one PUD change, any rezone. And then we also do it as an annexation, because I told you before in one of these sessions, an annexation appeal is very, very valuable. We've got a lot of work with you all to talk about that more, but especially with any rezone.
And I don't want to go down this road necessarily, but I don't know that we can't annex anything because we're already in the urban and rural, right? It's more of a change in designation than it is an annexation.
Again, we kind of want to chit chat about the future, and I talked about maybe some legislative changes. Or
yes.
I mean, since we talked at the last workshop, were there any changes made to the operational budget of the fire department? Or did that remain the same? Because I want to bring that up as an example, because it plays into my public comments about the unfunded portions of the budget.
So we did not make any changes because the Form 1s, those amounts are set. We cannot exceed the approved budgeted amounts. We did make some changes in the general fund to increase the operational dollars, which then supports pays for part of that fire department cost. We also approached it a little bit different in that the supplemental local income taxes that were brought in for 2021 were not brought to council for 2021 budget. And so looking at 2022, that cash then can help to also buffer the operational side of the expenses.
Can you elaborate on that?
So in 2021, we received $1.9 million of Yeah, of the supplemental local income tax distribution, and that was money held by the county. Yeah, the true up of what was dispersed to the units of government versus what was in the bank, and they released a certain threshold. We again do not have any of the supplemental lit distribution planned and programmed into the 2022 budget. We'll find out around May or June if we will get that. But that cash that we received in the public safety lit fund, as well as the general fund, is cash that we were not expecting and is available in the cash balance available for use. So we didn't want to lose sight of that as well.
So, but that's not guaranteed for 2022.
Correct, but we did receive the 2021.
Okay. But in dealing with the 22 budget, if you can go over the operational revenue and expense side, because that's helpful to illustrate my concerns around the unfunded projects.
Sure. And yeah, let me go over the unfunded projects first and then circle back around on the budgeting side, if that's okay. So when we look at the budget numbers, you'll notice that we have $6.1 million of requests that were given by the departments as part of, you would like this in our budget. But because of the restraint of the local income tax being lower than what we had expected, our property tax revenue did go up, but our local income tax went down by more. And so this $6.1 million, if we can look at it, we've got the request by fire department for capital. So you'll see over here, this capital column. And then we have parks requests for different capital expenses like Eagle Creek and Holiday Nature and Starkey parking lot. We've got motor vehicle highway, which includes county bridge pathway and some vehicles, as well as pathways and culvert replacements. Police has fleet equipment needs and vehicles. So you can see that this capital amount is almost $3 million of requests that are not included in the proposed 2022 budget at this point. And then on the personnel side, you can see that the departments would like more manpower in order to operate their departments. We have in here 7 firefighters and 3 police officers that, with the current budget revenues coming in, that we wanted to make sure that we could fund it and make it sustainable. So those, again, are not included in the 2022 budget. In services, there's a transportation plan update, as well as a 5-year master plan update, and engineering for a roundabout. And so you can see that the personnel costs were $2.1 million and the services are almost $1 million. And under operating, because the fire and police, they need uniforms and medical testing and things like that, you can see that there's another $32,000 that is for under the operating request. So that's what makes up that $6.1 million. And these are currently unfunded. Now, if we find out that we're going to get that supplemental lit distribution, or there's some other funding source that we can look to, then we can use this list and any updates to it from the departments. And then we would come before council and then ask for an additional appropriation, just like we've been doing in 2021. And so that's no different in the process.
As it sits, just to make it real simple, as it sits, these items on the unfunded list are essentially denied before it makes it to the budget that comes to us.
Correct, based on the revenue forecast that we have at this time.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
One of the concerns I have is when we were in that budget workshop, we heard from Captain Kleik and the 2 officers, be nice to have them, but we don't need them. Then we heard from Chief Van Gorder, those 7 firefighters, I need some of them. This department can't function without them. So that doesn't sound like, and something that they can live without.
So
But we-
on the fire side, we do have meetings set up to discuss with several stakeholders in the fire department, ongoing plans of what we can do to help in that situation. We did increase the overtime cost from 95,000 to 285,000 in the fire department at this time. Those are within the services and so, or within the personnel costs. So we can look at talking with those stakeholders and seeing again what we can do to mitigate the staffing issues that they see that they're having.
Tammy, how much did you say that was increased by for overtime?
95,000 to 285,000.
Do we know what the fire department needed, the 7 employees, how those 7 employees would fit into that 285 if we took that money instead of overtime?
Yes, there's some of that that information that was provided to the council liaison and in the budgeting process. So that's an ongoing discussion.
How
That,
many employees would fit within that 285?
oh,
That was not
sorry.
provided to
Okay,
me.
yeah, it would be 2.
The sustainability piece, going back to that, if we had a supplemental distribution, I would be worried about hiring 7 firefighters because it is a one-time supplemental distribution. How and when does the sustainability piece start becoming a part of that conversation? I understand capital costs, especially capital costs that are revenue generating, like the roundabout you mentioned, and I would recommend, you probably would, mentioning that when an appropriation comes up, that it was not adding to a budget deficit, but it's money earned and money out the door. But it would be helpful on that piece so that we do get those supplemental distributions and a decision is made to request it for, a police officer and 2 firefighters, that we're doing it in a way that is not causing problems down the road from a sustainability standpoint.
Can I add to that also?
Sure.
Is the point that I wanted to bring up along the budget, the operational budget for the fire department specifically, as we brought up that example in the budget workshop, is that you have the operating revenue for the fire department, which is like 6.3 million, something around there, and the operating expense being 7.1 million, somewhere around there. That, you're anticipating that to continue unless for some reason the operating revenue jumps up in following years, that you would run a continuous deficit. That doesn't seem like something sustainable over time either. So again, to your point, we have a sustainability problem even in that regard too, where we're continually using the reserves to fund operating deficits over time. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. And I guess as I've put it together and as I've done more exploratory surgery with this patient, I mean, I'm hitting my head on the table a little bit and it's starting to hurt because there's some things that we've got to address. And that's why the finance committee, as we go forward, is going to be critical. And so, yes, I'm saying
in the short term, I'm okay with it because we have to do it. But in the long term, it just does not seem sustainable to run an $800,000 deficit.
I think we've got a business model that won't work all the way down the path. That's what I'm seeing. So we've got to come up with some, my feeling is we've got to get the 22 budget. We've been looking at the 21 budget. We got to move on and we've got to really address some of the structural issues.
So to that point, is there a prediction of what the 2023 revenues might look like? I mean,
well, I've told you for 2023, I'm hoping that the non-farm payroll is going to be out, I think, at the end of this week from the feds. And remember, the non-farm payroll rolling 60-month average is what drives the growth quotient for property taxes. That's one big source of revenue. Second one is, my belief is, and you all know better than I do, but if everybody's employed in Boone County and working, and making a good wage, then our income taxes ought to rebound. And as I told you, if this was an atypical year, we'd be talking about $1.2 million of new money, and we're not at all. And so that's the speed bump we hit. And so I believe that, that we can project a return, keeping in mind the way I've presented the sustainability and the way we do it we'll make 6 annual updates to it, throughout the year as things change and as we know things. So it's an evergreen document that we can update and we can, change some of the assumptions.
So if we look next year at this time and see that our revenues grew at a modest 2% again, we've got some real hard choices to make at that point.
You do, and hard choice will it trend at 2% for the next 3 years after that? And if so, then yes, the rubber will meet the road.
We can't continue to use our reserves to shore up our operational deficits.
Nor would the mayor and everybody propose that, obviously. So that's where I'm saying there may be some structural issues that we've got to address.
Hey, Tammy, appreciate the detail and all the clarification. Just had more of a general question, and maybe you could pull it back up. Staffing is obviously critical. It's about 2/3 of the town's budget. Did you say that there was an across the board raise for all employees?
That is correct.
And what was that total revenue, whatever that total bump from 21 to 22?
Of
Dollar
the
amount?
personnel?
Yeah. The actual, just the increase from 21 to 22.
Yep.
Okay.
So from 29,522 to 17,784. And so when an employee is given an increase on the salary, there are also benefits that are associated with that salary, including retirement and FICA, Medicare, 401A matching dollars and things like that. So it's not a straight 4% increase, but all of those additions are included in these numbers here. So if we just do a quick $1.1 million.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's super important for us to make that investment. I think you presented to us previously kind of a compensation study that we had paid for, and you showed us some information maybe at the last meeting or the meeting before about kind of a median level. Does the 4% get us to the median? Does it get it over the median? Does it get it close to the median? Do you remember?
So if you recall, we did a small additional appropriation to get the people up to the minimum. And then this 4% will get us higher. And Joe can speak more in the next presentation when she presents the salary ordinance, but the bands are only going up by 2.1%. And these increases are going up by 4%. And again, she'll address that.
I'll say that, but
just I'm dealing with, even on county level, 16% increases and things like that. I'm going to be interested when the wage study comes out. I like to say it's about as good as yesterday, because if you don't use the 2022 payroll ordinances, you're going to be probably 10% behind where any time of the past day. This year has had more wage pressures in all 92 counties of the state of Indiana, and Martin County even, and all the way down there and stuff like that. More wage pressures than ever before.
And if you recall from the 2021 budget presentation that we had originally had proposed a 3% increase and then cut that back to a 1% increase from going from 2020 to 2021. So this 4% kind of helps to buffer that as well.
yeah, so I mean, really, it's just cost of living. I mean, it really isn't even we're not really moving towards the median much at all, right? We're just kind of trying to keep up.
Yeah, and as I told you, my market basket of inflation is 10 to 15%. Again, you go out and get ready for your light bill. And I think the mayor's absolutely on it by saying that we're trying to invest in our employees, because you lose valuable employees, it costs you that raise and many, many dollars after that to train them and to get them up to speed, especially in police and fire and all that. So it's a very wise move.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could do more, honestly. And
But we have to be a little careful of that, because it's as much as I would like to do as much for our employees as possible, we're living in unprecedented times where everybody is taking a hit. So we have to be mindful of the fact that we have to meet our own revenue increases and stay within our expected. So I guess to that point, Joe, will you speak to how other communities are dealing with their because I spoke to some and they seem to be fairly consistent with, like, Lebanon did a 2% increase last year and they're doing $2,500 increases this year, and other communities are doing.
The averages have been between 3% and 4%. If you look at anywhere from federal to state to all the different sectors. Anecdotally, I was with about 40 municipal HR people about 2 weeks ago. There were some outliers at 6%, but most were solidly at 4%.
For this coming budget
For
year.
2022.
What were they doing last year? They seem to range.
Some did none.
Yeah.
Again, there were some outliers that did 6% last year. But most were much more conservative with either there were a handful with 0, a couple with 1 and 2. And but I would say the majority of those folks were doing 3% last year.
what's unknown in those percentages is where are they already in the scale of where they're
Sure.
paying against a
The
median,
absolute amount. is
right? So you don't
important, too.
really know
No.
to compare that. You got to look at a lot of different data. But no, I mean, Alex, you're exactly right. We don't have the funds to do that. It would be nice if we did.
Tammy, Greg mentioned his inflationary basket is 10 to 15%. How much of that was taken into account with the department heads? For example, police and fuel, or even heating this building. Is that kind of baked in, or is that kind of an unknown right now?
So some of the ones that we did have knowns of, then we did plug those in, or based on actual information that's coming in. But fuel, for example, that's kind of an unknown any year. And so again, when we proposed the budgets, we tried to cover enough to where we don't have to come and ask for more. And so we're able to kind of maintain those levels. And as we mentioned before, the departments are working within their budgets to know if they overspend on the fuel line, then maybe they underspend on a different line.
So getting just briefly back to the unfunded projects, we are to understand that none of that is in any way, shape, or form necessary to the operations of this town at all.
I believe that the department heads were present at the meeting and that they answered it, yeah.
Yeah, we heard the answer. This
Yeah.
is more for public consumption.
Sure,
than
yes.
anything else.
The departments are, yes, understand that.
So, because I think it's important for us to realize that's because we're looking at the reserves and what that would mean and how we spend that, how we might be spending that down if we were to fund any of these projects, how additional funding might come in next year, all those kind of things, because the balanced budget, you've heard me criticize the balanced budget as not really being a balanced budget. But I understand where we are on this, and that we have opportunities in the future to fund these operational expenses to more of a balance. And so I'm grateful for that. When you pointed out the CARES funding and the other aspects of revenue that may be coming. So, but I wanted to make it clear for public discussion that none of these unfunded projects are necessary for the functioning of the town.
Great point.
So I appreciate the mayor for listening to this council about getting a balanced budget. I think that's important. I have a little bit of homework for you, just to kind of, for next meeting, we don't have to go through this now, but it would be helpful to me to have a more updated understanding of where we are financially right now. I have it through June 30th, but understanding that as we go into approving this budget would be helpful. It also, can you bring up that Word document again, or that PDF you had with all sort of the priorities? So it would be helpful for me as well. And you and I have talked about this, that there is, we collectively, mayor, council, have communicated now to the public, these are the budget priorities, that there is a mechanism in place that if these budget priorities change, there is a public discussion of that change. There is a, this is why it changed. This is why we want it to change. And then there is a vote on that. So however that can be set up to do that, so it isn't administratively cumbersome, but that I just want to make sure that things that are presented to us and then presented to the community are actually done. And if they aren't done, there's a rationale for it, which is fine. And the last is understanding of all of the funds that we pull from, if and what there are any funds that don't require any sort of additional approval for appropriation out of, so that I think we've just got the best financial controls in place. And I'm anxious to hear what this finance committee is also able to come up with, things we aren't able to come up with. But I think if you can provide those to this group before the next vote, that would certainly go a long way to getting this wrapped up.
Yes, and we can do that.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tammy, I would, in addition to some of the stuff that President Garrett mentioned, in looking at the form that was sent, Form 1, and even in messing around on the gateway, or the whatever the system is that you had signed us up for, OpenGov. Yeah, OpenGov on that. There's about $1.1 million in the general account, or the general fund, I should say, that's for things like professional services or contractual services. Parks, for example, says improvements other than building improvements, but there's nothing specifically detailed for that $314,000, or administration, professional services, contractual services, nothing detailed for that $136,000. Is that something that you anticipate getting to us for the budget approval?
Council was provided an email with the detail. I believe Councilor Traylor had requested that on the consulting and the contractual services breakdowns and some other information.
For the entire 1-1?
Yes, for the 2022 budget as presented.
It was, but it's, I think what you're looking at is, it's not something that we can hold anybody to. It was just a Excel spreadsheet that kind of broke it down. So it wasn't in.
Yeah, it's not in I'm saying it's not in like anywhere for us to, I mean, it might be in the Excel spreadsheet. You might have that there, but it's nothing for us to vote on, right?
Well, I think that dovetails into my ask, which is if the information we have is approving, a PR firm, right? That if the decision is made not to use it for those funds, that there is then discussion and vote, if you will, to make that change without it being too restrictive, right? And setting that threshold of what that is.
Yeah. Being more specific so that we make sure that what we think we're approving in a budget is what we're actually going to get done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Heather, anything to add on the process this is the first reading. If there are any tweaks that have to happen or requested to happen, it can happen between now and then. Anything else you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah, so tonight you're just introducing the budget. So you do have the opportunity to make changes between now and the end. I think Tammy made a point that the Form 3, which is something that's submitted to the state, has already been published along with the public hearing, which is this evening. And what that means for you all is that, for example, There's $0 in the fire department because those monies have been rolled up to the general fund in that sort of line item appropriation. So you cannot move following tonight, monies from the general fund to the fire fund to make like a line item budget, outside of the appropriation, unless you were to decide that you were going to republish the notice of public hearing and rework the Form 3. So you're locked into the categories and you can't spend more than what's been published as part of our Form 3. So for example, local road and street, you're limited to $500,000 in that particular fund if you move forward without making any change to the Form 3 or re-noticing a public hearing. So yes, you have some flexibility to change individual expenditures encapsulated within those funds, but you don't have, absent going back and modifying the Form 3, the ability to change where those monies set. Tammy, correct?
That's correct.
You're much more
Yep.
competent.
And based on,
You can spend less. That's the ceiling.
This is the maximum. It's setting the maximum of the budget estimate and the maximum of the tax levy.
Yeah, so it's basically just the notice to the public that this is the money that you plan to spend, and these are the receipted tax sources and revenues that you plan to receive and where they'll be receipted in each of those individual funds.
and
we
based on
can't-
what Tammy had said, just to clarify, Heather, that the fund department and category are still locked in. So
Not at this point. At this point, we still have flexibility up until the budget adoption.
right, but once it's adopted, in other
Correct.
words, the conversation that we had was if we moved the park stuff from general to the parks fund, it probably was 6 of one, half dozen of the other, is my understanding, because it would still be locked in after it's done to that department and category. So I was concerned in the past about it sort of having flexibility at the fund level when it's down 3 levels to the category level. I think it alleviated at least what my concern was.
Yeah, so you're talking about within the general fund, the subcategory then has to stay, if it's subcategorized for parks and recreation, it has to stay in parks and recreation. Those monies can move around within the department. They can't be taken from parks and recreation and given to the fire department, for example, even though it's in the general fund.
Has to stay within the category
Correct.
within. the
Right, there is
department.
flexibility to move it within the category, within the department,
Correct,
to be able
Yes.
to meet the kind of.
which would be if there was its own fund anyways, right?
Correct,
So,
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And then I heard Tammy say, and I apologize, it wasn't part of the budget discussion on Friday. I heard Tammy say as well that the capital spending, the goal is for all the capital spending to be done by additional appropriation. So we said, Tammy?
There's capital expenses within this operating budget for like general fleet replacement, for instance. So the police department, they need to replace their fleet vehicles. It would be anything in addition to that is the capital on that unfunded list that is not included.
And that's similar to what we did for Parks and Recreation and Fire Department capital expenditures last year. So is that going to carry through to all categories, all departments for their capital funds if they're not in the published budget? I'm just wondering, last year we did have that additional resolution, I think we did, that talked about, the capital funds.
The earmarked
being
funds.
Earmarked.
mhm.
I just want to make sure what we're preparing, because that's going to be an extra document we'll need to prepare at some point before year end, correct, Tammy?
We'll
It's our
talk
year-
about it.
Okay. So I think that's the only other thing that we would need to work out, but that typically, we did that. It doesn't have to be done before the November 1st. It just has to be done by year end, if I'm not mistaken. We did that last year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I just want to make sure I heard everybody right.
So Heather, if we have a specific line item that we want to propose cut, would we do that now? Will we do that at the next meeting? When would that be appropriate?
I think the earlier you do it, the
All right.
better. So I'd recommend doing it this evening because Tammy and Greg will need to go back and rework the numbers and make sure that the categories still are the same.
And that would be because I have my question is I've got two things I want to cut. And I have little doubt that there'll be some opposition to the cuts. So would we vote to introduce minus these two items? Or how would that work?
So I would recommend that there be discussion among the council of your goals. If you're going to modify the introduced budget, you could either throw them out tonight just for public transparency. And so Tammy and others can understand what those are and how that might, change the dynamics of the budget discussion.
Okay.
For final reading. We did that last year. We moved things around until the very last minute last year. So you can certainly do that. I don't think you're not locked in by introducing the
Okay.
budget this evening for making those changes. Again, with the caveat that you can't change the fund amounts unless you're asking the administration to make a change to the Form 3.
Okay. So the two items that I would like to see cut, I would like to see the total postage reduced by $31,300. And I would like to see the promotions decreased. I'm more flexible on how much on this one. So for reference, in 2020, our total promotions budget was 13,000. And when adding up all of the promotions in this budget, it comes to $62,100. So, effectively over the course of 2 years, a 478% increase. So I would like to see that cut to a maximum of 26,000, because that still gives a big bump from the 13,000 in 2020. It would give it a bump to 26,000, which I think is fair. I think the total promotions is just excessive compared to where we were just last year.
Brian, where are those promotions, just so I can follow along?
So
Form
if you're
one.
looking at Form 1, I actually just did a quick search by promotions in the line item. So they go down to several different categories. You've got one for controller, you've got a promotions budget for the mayor. So the controllers is $1,000, the mayor's is $35,000. There's a promotions budget for planning and zoning. I'm saying the total of all of those, I would like to see not have that huge jump that we're seeing from 2020 to now.
And these are not promotions for salaries. I just want to make sure.
No.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know,
Promotions,
but I want the public don't
Promotional
think we're
pieces,
just.
promotional
Yeah.
items, promotional, just promoting, overall promotions. I think that's a category that you'd see go up, but not so significantly in such a short period of time.
Tammy, do you or anyone want to talk about what's the benefit of those?
And we can definitely look at that. When you receive the updated financials, or even if you look at those June 30th balances, you'll notice that not all of those are fully maximized. Those are to promote employees, promote the relationships with the town and outside vendors, promotions as far as promotional items, so communications, economic development purposes, and those kind of things. So that's more of a line item that's not necessarily utilized all the time, but it's there whenever the departments need it. We like to have the departments post expenses to where the actual expenses happening. So what we don't want to happen is for departments to not have a promotions line and then to have a promotional item and it's posted to contractual services, for example. So you'll notice in the older budgets that there's not promotions lines for the departments per se. And so I think some of it is nomenclature of how things were recorded before and just not having that structure in place. And then we want the ability to be able to track it. Obviously with COVID, that promotions line in in this year and potentially last year, right, would not have been utilized because people are not getting together as much. So we will go back and look at that. Thank you for your comments on that.
Yeah, so I think that's fair if next meeting, so the request has been made, if you can come back, if you, the mayor or the department heads want to come back and explain what it was used for this year, what it's going to be used for next year, and then there can be a debate on that with that information to determine if it stays in or not. Are there any other of those counselors of these light items that you have concerns about?
So specifically to, I did not include in that the $350,000 from the food and beverage fund, because my, excuse me, my assumption is that is, when it's listed as promotions, that's going into the fund that, say the Chamber of Commerce and others would request grant funds from, correct?
That is absolutely
All right,
correct.
so I intentionally left
Yes.
that alone as its own item because I think that is important.
Great.
To support that group for those
Thank you.
groups.
And I will, there was one change to the Form 1 as well. In the Parks Department, there was vehicles that is for 19,200. And so we would request that one go down to 0 on the final adoption because that is part of the unfunded request associated with a new personnel. So that one would go down to 0. So that's updated in the budget platform already. If you go back and look at that. So I have that change and we'll continue to look and make sure that we have all of those changes in there.
Amy, do you know what I mentioned the 314 in the Parks Department, that wasn't in the email to Councilor Trailer. There's parks improvement other than building improvements for $314,000. Do you know what that's for?
I will go back and ask the Parks Department for clarification on that. And if there's any other lines that you see that you want a further breakdown, then I can get that from the departments and then pass that on to council.
And then do you know how much you mentioned in the list of priorities that there was a study from the police department regarding their fleet to electronic vehicles? Do you know how much that study costs or will cost?
I do not know that, but we will find out and get that to you.
Okay, because that I didn't see that outlined anywhere in here either.
And it might be just the police officers researching that as well.
Councilors, any other questions? Well, while you're thinking about it, this is a public hearing. I know Amy was worried I'd forget about this, but I'm not gonna, Amy. So if anyone from the public wants to come up and speak about this, you may come up. I'll open the public hearing up. All right, and we'll close the public hearing. Oh, and there's proof of publication. Councilors, anything else on the budget? Anything else for Tammy? Thanks, Tammy. That was good information. Any motions on the budget?
Motion to introduce.
We got a first from Councilor Choi to introduce 2021-11 on first reading. Who's the second? Councilor Burke. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, ordinance 2021-11 is introduced on first reading with a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Last new business item, we've got a consideration of a 2022 salary ordinance for the town of Zionsville. This is a first reading. Joe, the floor is yours. This is ordinance 2021-12.
Good. I will make this as short as can be. It's my pleasure to present the 2022 salary ordinance and holiday schedule. In 2021, we created a new compensation study that is designed to grow with the employee and grow with the town. If you recall at the time, I anticipated the 2022 increase to be between 2 and 3%. The recommendation is 2.1%, which is in line with, the consultant's recommendation with market, World of Work studies, SHRM studies, the Archer Company, all the major studies. Note that the bands do not impact the actual budget and impact the actual employee's salary. They're really just bumpers that describe the minimum, midpoint, and maximum for anybody's salary. The ordinance itself includes 4 job titles to more accurately reflect the position: Assistant Fire Chief, title replaces the Deputy Chief of Prevention. Fire Marshal replaces the Fire Inspector title. That role was changed earlier in the year, but we just want to formalize the title change. And then the former Court and Social Services Administrator position was broken to two different part-time positions. And those titles is Social Services Investigator and Court Administrator. There were no changes in the 2022 holiday schedule except for the dates for observation. And that is all I have.
Very good. Short and to the point. I like it. Any questions for Joe on this? Well, if not, I'll make a motion to introduce this ordinance on first reading.
Second.
I heard Counselor Trailer first. Sorry, Joe. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Ordinance 2021-12 is introduced on first reading with a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Any other matters, counselors?
Yeah, Mr. President, I just wanted to bring up in the minutes. I know we approved those earlier and I apologize. You kind of buzzed through them. But on the memorandum of the minutes, as I read through them, there were 3 areas where the recorder or whoever was taking the notes, one on page 25 of 32, one on 28 of 32, and one of 29 of 32, where Counselor Burke spoke. And it said that Counselor Melton was the one speaking. So if we could get those changes on the 9/20/21 minutes.
Got it. I believe it's a machine that's doing all of that. But Heather, do we need to re-vote on anything like that? Just enter in the record or?
Yeah, since you already voted, I would recommend that you make a motion to revise the memorandum and then re-vote that just for process. And then maybe we'll make sure that we get those, you went through those pretty quick. I was trying to write, but you could maybe list them one more time, Amy, and I'll get those corrected.
Yeah, I'd like to amend the memorandum approval that we've already voted on with changes to page 25 of 32, page 28 of 32, and page 29 of 32, where it states Melton was speaking when it was actually Burke.
Okay.
You complimenting President Garrett or something?
Surely not. That's a
second
motion. There's a second for Vice President Plunkett. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion to amend is approved. Any other matters?
I know.
I'll want to mention one thing. I did notice on the town's website or Facebook page that the Arts and Cultural District received another $2,500 grant for public art. And I am fully supportive of public art and of them receiving the funding. My ask is that they take into consideration the art that's being put out and that they try to avoid any further controversy by art that maybe will be misrepresented or misinterpreted by the public. We have one instance where we've got a piece of artwork that I will point back to a Facebook post I put out on August 21st for anybody that might want to go back and look at it. My thoughts on that piece of artwork. It was actually very supportive of the artwork, just not supportive of the placement. But I would say that if we have artwork being put out there, it should be easily understood and fairly benign in nature as far as controversial topics. So that's my ask. The mayor has put the duty on the cultural district's shoulders. She will not be approving any artwork. It's up to them. They can really, per the mayor's conversation with me, they can put up anything they want. I'm just asking that they be sensitive to the entire community when they approve the artwork that they're going to put up. Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Sunday, October 10th is World Mental Health Day. And I want to bring this up because one of the things that I've been working on is on mental health awareness. And that's been an important part of what I wanted to do for this community when I started on the council.
I have been very fortunate enough to be able to work with two incredible people, Amber Nunez and Carrie Ann Jordan, who are in the audience right now. They have done so much work around this in the mental health initiative. They are two advanced practice nurses and retired advanced practice nurses and two parents in the Zionsville community that have done the yeoman's work on looking at mental health issues in the community and looking at where we have gaps and issues that we need to address to be able to create wellness in the community. And I've been very fortunate enough to be able to partner with them on this. And one of the things that we wanted to do is to start off by breaking the stigma around this. And as Sunday is World Mental Health Day, I wanted to share a little story to let people know that it's okay to hurt. And one of the things is I think it'd be hypocritical. All three of us shared our stories with each other when we first met about why this was important to us. And we all come from different backgrounds, but we've all struggled through issues of our own. And my issue is that I've been a diagnosed bipolar disorder for many years and have struggled with mania and depression. I currently see a therapist and have on a weekly basis and have a psychiatrist. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to seek help. I'm also a recovering alcoholic, which is why I haven't drank in almost 5 years. And it's actually harder to talk about the fact you're an alcoholic. It's almost like the stigma is deeper with substance abuse than with any kind of mental health issues. So we've heard from a number of people in the community, especially our teenagers, and they are hurting. And I want to say to the three of us, want to say to our young people and our adults that it's okay to look for help. Please come out and find help. It is a struggle, especially in these times. It is really hard for all of us. And so as we look towards each other for guidance, look inside yourself for the strength to reach out to others and to seek out help. It's okay to hurt and it's okay to seek out help. So thank you.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that, Councilor Choi. I know that can't be easy. Any other councilors before we move on to claims? We've got then claims and make a motion, unless there's any questions on claims. Make a motion to approve claims. Second from Burke. Very good, Councilor
Not
Burke.
Melton. I don't want him having to.
Machine, remember that was Councilor Burke. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Claims are approved by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second from Councilor Trailer. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Monday, October 18th, 2021 at 7:30 a.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Final notice will be posted in compliance with Indiana open door law. Have a safe trip if anyone's going away on fall break.